This time on the show, we're going to be talking with Ed Schouten about Cloud ABI. It's a new application binary interface with a strong focus on isolation and restricted capabilities. And as always, we're going to have all the week's BSD news and answers to your emails on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 88, Below the Clouds, recorded May 6, 2015. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to have you guys with us this week. We got another exciting episode of BSD Now. Lots of news. We're going to have a live interview for you guys a little later today. But, man, we do have a lot of news to get to this week, some long ones. So we should probably get right into it here.
Yes.
So first up, we're going to go to FreeBSD news, and we got a quarterly status report which has hit the interwebs.
Yeah.
And the FreeBSD team posts these every now and then,
quarter,
obviously.
The
every
next
quarter.
one is due July 7th. So if you want something in the next quarterly status report, you have to send it in to the oddly named monthly at freebsd.org by July 7th in order to get in the quarterly status report.
To get into the quarterly. Go figure, right?
So normally I would spend way too much time covering all of this, but I'm going to try to avoid that.
What, you're not going to read the full list this week,
I'm going to try to read only the list and not the details on everything. But they have reports from Bugmeister and talking more about the change from NATs to Bugzilla and some of the work to integrate that with GitHub and all that fun stuff. The ports team talks about their 7,000 commits that happened in the last quarter and how they're still battling to close all those PRs people open and get all those problems solved. The core team has their report where they dealt with the accidental deletion of the Bugzilla database and how they recover for that. Yeah, I know. I think Gavin and a couple people spent quite a bit of time trying to fix that one.
Yeah, that's a big oops.
They also talked about ZFS's future release support model. It has finally been finalized and was published in February. And so that's how that will work going forward. Then they have some topics that are still being discussed. This core team is discussing whether or not to MFC the ZFS ARC responsiveness patches to the 10 branch, specifically. So those come in 11, but they're kind of big changes. And it's like, do we push those into 10 or do we not?
Would they change anything as far as API?
Not
goes?
So much, but it's.
I
don't know if they're sure if it's stable enough yet.
It's just that it's a big change and therefore scary.
Especially with the release coming up very shortly, right? And whether or not to maintain or abandon the C89 support for kernel code, which I think has to do with whether or not we can use all the newer stuff, or if we have to try to maintain backwards compatibility. Also, there was Beehive, lots of activity there, including the ability to boot Windows. That was fun.
Oh, yeah.
Cherry BSD, which is the fork of FreeBSD to run on the special capability enhanced processor that they developed at Cambridge. Lots of people working on that. Clang and LLVM updates.
So Cherry is CHERI for those who don't know.
Yeah. And then Clang and LLVM were updated to 3.6.0. FreeBSD boots on the Power 8 platform. All the stuff going on in Jenkins, including they're now checking the builds of the ARM and MIPS and so on. The Lua bootloader stuff is actually starting to go in, so that's there. The Mellanox iSCSI extensions, so that you can do all the fancy things. If you have a Mellanox network card that has the iSCSI offload stuff, you can let the card do half the work for you. A bunch of interesting stuff there. Multipath TCP for FreeBSD, which is big. The new auto mounter has stuff. Opaque IFNet, which will make it easier in the future to build network drivers and so on. Updates to package and secure boot.
Okay.
And then,
well, the first secure boot, I was excited to see they got some of the utilities and ports now
yes.
for doing the signing and whatnot. That'll make it very helpful because we may use that for Grub as well.
Yeah, so that one will be a big thing. Then in the kernel, they got the PCI Express hot plug support. That's both. That one's an interesting dual use where it's used on laptops and high-end servers. It's interesting to have that one going on in both.
Okay.
Then they have the address-based layout randomization work from HardenedBSD. Update on that. Support for VTD and other modern x86 platform stuff for hardware pass-through and so on. Nanosecond file timestamps, so you can tell when the file was modified to more, level of detail.
Greater accuracy. Yeah.
That can be especially important for like NFS and stuff when you have multiple servers updating a file and so on. Architectures, you have FreeBSD on the new ARM stuff, the ARM64 stuff, FreeBSD for EC2, and the nested kernel stuff, which is also very interesting. Then for userland, they have the threading library improvements, migrating away from the GNU to the ELF toolchain. I forget which tools it's specifically about, but adder to line, readelf, size, the strings utility, the strip utility, that kind of stuff for building the binaries.
So they say they don't have any replacements yet for like LD or object dump for AS yet, but
working towards it.
Hopefully down the road.
Then they also the update on the LLDB debugger, so that would replace GDB, but also updating GDB, which I think will be available from ports because of the license. I'm not sure what the plan is for that one, but if you want to know, you can read the status report. And then for ports, they have the ATA ports, the Python ports, GNOME, KDE. The graphics stack has an update telling us what's going on with the DRM and GL.
Well, I note here they said they're still hoping to get Haswell in time for 10.2. So we'll see if that makes it in.
Yes, we very much look forward to that. And more news related to that coming up later in the show. Then they also have Wine and XFCE updates. Michael Lucas points out that he's been working on books, including the new ZFS book, FreeBSD Mastery ZFS, which I co-authored with Michael, is available for pre-order now. We've finished the tech review, and a new version should be up on the website for that fairly soon as well. But if you buy it now, you get the in-progress draft for 10% off, and that'll keep being updated until the final version comes out, and you get the final version DRM free. Or you can wait and buy a paper copy or whatever you like. And the Foundation posted their update where they have, including links to 2 episodes of BSD Now, where we talked to Ed, Mast, and
Justin Gibbs.
And they also talk about the conferences they went to, including Usenix, FAST, FOSDEM, and Scale, and the FreeBSD journal stuff that came out. I don't think we've actually mentioned that on the show, but the was it the March-April edition of the FreeBSD journal came out, including a ZFS article by me and a bunch of other interesting stuff. So if you haven't checked that out, you need to check that as well.
Well, there's definitely a lot of stuff there. And I know also we had a note here from TJ that it looks like ARM support. They're working to make that a tier 1 platform in 11.0 release. So that'll be something to look forward to if you're an ARM fan and wanting to play around with ARM a bit. Okay, well, next up in the news, now we got a big long stack of OpenBSD stuff to talk about. OpenBSD 5.7 has landed. So we've got their next version out, and of course the giant changelog to go along with. So just up front here, we got a hardware department. We got a bunch of new drivers and fixes, as well as support for some new things, such as USB 3.0 controllers, newer Intel and Atheros wireless cards, and some additional 10 gigabit NICs. So how cool is that? And also, if you're using one of the Socris boards, there's even a new driver to manipulate the GPIO and LEDs in them.
So you can play with the LEDs in the
interesting.
Socris.
I see some people having fun hacking with that. You can make it flash stuff.
I wish the LED driver in FreeBSD got more support from companies like LSI and Supermicro so that I could play with the lights on the hard drives. Currently, the only thing that usually ever works is actually faking the lights on your NIC, which isn't very useful. Making one of the lights be stuck on or off is really not as useful as making the
on the back of the system.
It's not as useful as making the red light on the hard drive that's having a problem turn on.
Yeah, that would be helpful for sure. Especially when you call the data center and you're like, just go yank the one where the red light's flashing on the drive. Like, done. Okay. So also we got some new security improvements, including SIP hash being sprinkled into some of the areas to protect their hashing functions. We got the WXRX improvements in the kernel space and static PIE on all architectures, which we have links to an episode where we talked to somebody about that. So you'll want to go take a look. And also deterministic random functions being replaced now with strong randomness and support for remote logging over TLS. Also, the entire source tree has been audited to use the realloc array function, which is going to be awesome. I think I saw that land in FreeBSD not too long ago, too. They ported that over. I think
it was Baptiste imported it.
Yeah, nice. So it looks like this already unintentionally saved their libc from a vulnerability to some earlier attacks affecting the other BSD implementation. So that's definitely a good win there. And of course, being that it's OpenBSD, the number of things have been nuked from the base system because they're too old or we don't need them or don't want them anymore, right? So among those, ProcFS is gone, SendMail, SSL-v3 support, loadable kernel modules are all gone now. And not to mention, of course, there's the ongoing massacre of code in LibreSSL as they remove all the cruft from the OpenSSL fork there. Also, some people are going to be surprised hearing about removal of loadable modules, but in OpenBSD, apparently no one was, or not many people were utilizing them. So it was just really removing old code that no one was using anymore.
I remember when we first talked about
very
that,
different from
a couple of months ago, because that's when the change would have happened in their head, and nobody seemed to notice after the fact. So
well, it confused me at first, but then not being a big OpenBSD user, if no one's using it, makes sense. Because in FreeBSD land, it's like I use modules for everything.
Exactly.
Don't take my modules away.
I don't think there were that many modules, and they were mostly for things people didn't use. So they're like, oh, we'll put it in a module so it can be outside the kernel. It's like, well, if we pulled this code out of the kernel and made it a module because people weren't using it enough, then maybe, just get rid of it instead.
There's no point in having it anymore. Yeah, makes sense. Also, bind and nginx have been taken out, so you'll need to grab a version of those from the ports tree if you plan on using it, or switch to unbound and the in-base HTTP daemon, which is there. And speaking of which, it has got a number of new features, which we'll have links to in the show notes here if you want to take a look at the gory details. It's also had a little bit of time to grow and mature since it initially debuted, so if you've been considering trying it out, this is probably a good release to go ahead and get your feet wet with it and see what you think. Also, this release is going to include the latest OpenSSH, which has the stronger fingerprint types and host key rotation, which we've talked about on previous episodes. OpenNTPD with the HTTPS constraints feature is in, and OpenSMTPD, LibreSSL, and ManDoc, which we have links to an interview we did about that. So, man, there's a lot of good stuff here. It's like all just kind of congealing in this release. But check out, of course, the errata page for any post-fix releases, and there's an upgrade guide that we have links to. So if you hit the show notes, you can grab that for specific instructions if you're upgrading from 5.6. And looking ahead, though, which we're always looking ahead to new releases and more news and stuff we can talk about in the future, it looks like they're already laying the groundwork for some major SMP scalability improvements. Yeah. So we're definitely looking forward to those in a future release. And I think we need to interview somebody about that, Alan. Like, that would be interesting to hear about the ongoing work to make that work a lot better.
I heard a little bit about it at Asia BSDCon when during the question period for Henning's talk about why OpenBSD sucks. He got some questions from FreeBSD people. It was like, so with your release cycle of 3 months of work, 3 months of stabilizing, release, 3 months of work, 3 months stabilizing, release, how do you do some of the SMP work where it's kind of like, well, we have to kind of change everything all at once? It's like,
this is 9 months worth of work, right?
And they're like, so it takes longer because we've been doing a small chunk at a time, but a lot of that stuff, the cleaning up and so on, has been done. It's just it hasn't been kind of switched on yet because you're waiting for those the other pieces to be ready. And then kind of it's like, so we fixed like these 10 parts, but they all rely on this other part being fixed first. And once that one's done, it'll kind of just be all at once. A bunch of this stuff
we'll probably see things just get switched on, and all of a sudden it's there.
Yeah. So a lot of work being done, and hopefully in not too much longer they'll have all the SMP stuff.
Yeah, and we will of course bring you that info as soon as it lands. And speaking of the release, of course it's OpenBSD,
Yes.
which means there has to be a song and artwork to go along with it.
Exactly.
So a CD should be arriving in a few days, and when we get our hands on some, I'm sure Alan will be showing you some there. And also consider picking them up at the store they have to support them. And it's also the only way you can get the awesome puffy stickers. So if you go to the conference and you see the OpenBSD guys, or even a lot of the FreeBSD guys have them on the back of their laptop too, because they're just stinking cool stickers. So definitely go pick some up there. And also, if you're paying close attention, the banner image for this release might remind you of a certain episode maybe we had done a while back, and we'll let you go click the links and compare that for yourself. Okay, well, next up in the news, we have some Tor news. This is kind of cool. And we've talked about this a little bit in the past, diversity of your operating systems. Go ahead, Alan. I'll let you.
So we talked about it before, that the problem with Tor's current problem is that almost all of the nodes run on Linux. And so if there was a problem or a vulnerability with Linux or something, that would mean that somebody could take out most of the entire Tor network, and that would be a problem. And so there's the Tor Diversity Project, which aims to get a whole bunch more Tor nodes running different flavors of BSD, including FreeBSD, NetBSD, OpenBSD, and DragonflyBSD, and possibly tangential projects like pfSense. Lots of people have pfSense, and if there was a Tor plugin or something they could do on that might be interesting.
That would make sense.
And they give a little bit of background, and
so they want to see more and more relays. So I guess it's kind of like the same thing with Bitcoin, right? You don't want 51% of the machines to get taken over and control the network, so you need to have that ecosystem diversity. Exactly. So the next time there's a shell shock or some big bug, you don't want to have 90% of your nodes be vulnerable to it. That's just bad. So the quote we have here, though, from this site is monocultures in nature are dangerous as vulnerabilities are held in common across a broad spectrum. Diversity means single vulnerabilities are less likely to harm the entire ecosystem. A single kernel vulnerability in GNU Linux that impacts Tor relays could be devastating. We want to see a stronger Tor network, and we believe one critical ingredient for this is operating system diversity.
Yeah.
So definitely a noble cause.
Right. We've seen
here.
the same, we'll mention it later in the show, but we're having VBSDCon this year, powered by VeriSign. And one of the reasons they use BSD is because they didn't want all the servers that run the .com and .net infrastructure to be Linux or Solaris or BSD. They kind of divided up between all three of those so that no matter what happens, hopefully the other two out of the three are still there, and the internet keeps working.
Well, they have time to fix the one, right? We don't want to break the internet.
Yes, because while we talk about many different things breaking the internet, taking out the root servers for .com and .net would actually break the internet. It's pretty much the only thing you could do to break the internet, but it's what would happen.
Sure. So, and that's why VeriSign does this. So, also, as we've mentioned in the past, the Tor browser bundle. So there's some more work in porting that to BSD, so desktop users can have some easier access to online privacy. And we have a link here to a progress report for that part. And it looks like most of the work's done now. So hopefully we'll see that land here in some ports trees here before too long. And also they're trying to engage the broader BSD community about Tor, and of course fixing up the official documentation's also on their to-do list, probably to make it a little more platform agnostic and have some BSD info there. So if you've been considering running a node to help out, guess what? We do have a guide on that, a tutorial up on our site. So shameless plug for the website there, but go ahead and click on it and get that set up.
For sure.
Okay, well, next up, we have some PCBSD news here. So we just released our 10.1.2 release candidate 1 a few days back. So this is going to be the first sneak peek at the next quarterly update, which is still based on FreeBSD 10.1, but has all the latest packages and bug fixes and features from the PCBSD project. So that's up for grabs now. You can grab that off our website. The quarterly update includes a lot of new features, and I'll go through a couple of these for you. So a big one I really like is something we wrote called PersonaCrypt, which is a new tool for migrating to encrypted home directories. So I'm actually using it here on my desktop that we're doing the show on, Alan, but I have a SSD USB key that I've plugged in, and my home directory lives on that in encrypted form, and I have that device paired with my desktop and my laptop. So now when I'm done at my desktop, I can just unplug that device and plug it into my laptop and keep on working with my same user and home directory, and all my development environment and all my goodies are all where I need it, so I can take that with me on the road and whatnot, and being encrypted if I lose it or somebody takes it or gets stolen or something, and not a big deal. You don't have the password, and even if they beat the password out of me, it's split into two parts. You still need a PC that it's paired to get the other half fit, which is kind of cool. And Jelly makes that all possible in FreeBSD. Another cool new feature is stealth mode, which allows you to do a one-time login using a blank home directory that's going to get wiped after you log out or reboot the system. So that uses Jelly as well with a one-time key.
Yeah, so
anything written to disk is
the big difference there is rather than just writing it to a directory and then deleting it when you log out, it's actually writing it to an encrypted directory, so that once you throw away the key, which is actually done as soon as you start, so even while it's still mounted, the key's already been destroyed. That means that even if they do forensic analysis of your hard drive, they're not going to be able to get anything you wrote because it's all been encrypted with a key. That's gone now. You couldn't get it back if you wanted.
It's worthless to them. So that's right. So that's why we use that feature. It's a really cool thing that Jelly does, and that kind of works hand in hand with the new next feature we have, Tor mode, which our firewall manager has gotten a lot of love in this release, which will allow you to turn your firewall into a Tor network and basically route all of your desktop traffic through Tor. So if you pair that with stealth mode, we're hoping to give you some tools so you can practice some better privacy and anonymity online. Also, IPFW is now the default firewall in PCBSD, and we're doing that to start offering vImage capabilities for jails, which is a fully virtualized network stack, so you can run pretty much anything in a jail, which is really cool. Also, the Life Preserver utility, which is what we use for doing backups and replication using ZFS to send your system data offsite. If you want to do a full bare metal restore, you can do that, but it now offers the option of doing that via encrypted backup. So we've had it for a while to do it via your regular ZFS replication, which is great, but we added support for doing bare metal restore from encrypted iSCSI ZFS replications now, which is pretty slick. So you don't have to trust the remote end even, which is always cool. In addition, we have a little bit of OpenBSD has made its way into your PCBSD here. So we got OpenNTPD is now the default. We shut off the NTP in the base system, which probably is a good thing because there's already been a few vulnerabilities that have come out since then, and it's nice. I don't have to worry about that now. Also, OpenSSL has been replaced with LibreSSL for the ports. So all ports are now built against LibreSSL. OpenSSL is still in the base for FreeBSD, obviously. So FreeBSD base utilities will use that version of OpenSSL. But everything else, your Firefoxes and whatnot, will now be using LibreSSL.
I think Firefox actually uses its own thing, the NSS, right? The Netscape security suite.
It has its own thing? Oh,
well, shoot. I think that was just a bad example. Everything else uses LibreSSL.
That's right. And there's a lot. If you go look on like fresh ports or whatever, look at the OpenSSL ports, how many things can depend on it. There is a lot of stuff out there.
Lots.
Yeah, we've switched all those over to LibreSSL, and we had a fellow who did a ton of work, and I think it was Bernard Spill. I thought
we interviewed him a couple weeks ago. But the interesting one,
he did a ton of work to make that all happen.
I built yesterday. I built a set of packages for a mail server, and in total, the mail server is going to end up being 300 packages. And then I switched which version of OpenSSL from ports it was going to use, and it had to rebuild 64 of the 300 packages.
Oh, nice.
And most of the ones it didn't have to rebuild were Perl things between Request Tracker and Spam Assassin. Half of all the packages are Perl CPAN modules.
Yep.
Actually, some of those even had to be.
Also, we have the new Lumina desktop. Oh, good.
I'm done. Sorry.
Well, it's amazing how many things touch OpenSSL that you don't know about, right? Things just take for granted. Oh, I didn't know it used SSL. There was, I forget, a couple graphics packages even we looked at, plugins were using SSL for fetching stuff off the net and stuff. I was like, why does that care about OpenSSL? Yet it does. So also we updated the new Lumina desktop in there. So I think 0.8.4 is the new release, and we'll have links in the show notes if you want to see a screenshot and hear about all the new features of that. But it's definitely got some major work. And of course, binary packages have all been updated to the latest version from the FreeBSD ports tree as of about a week ago. And of course, we're backporting security fixes when those land. So more details, including the upgrade instructions, are all on the blog post. So go ahead and hit the show notes for that if you'd like to take a look and test upgrading your system. Okay, well, man, that was a lot of news today, Alan. But before we go to our interview, of course, we've got to mention our first sponsor for the week, which is going to be iXsystems, and that's going to be iXsystems.com/BSD Now. That's the URL you want to go to and get in touch with these guys. And I think there was some new video we have to talk about, Alan. I don't know
they
if
have a new
show that on your screen there.
FreeBSD 9 first time setup wizard video.
Okay. Nice. Or FreeNAS 9, you mean, right?
What I meant. Sorry. FreeNAS 9.3.
Oh, okay. Okay, no problem. I was going to say FreeBSD 9. I thought we've moved on, but yeah, FreeNAS 9.3 setup wizard. So definitely very cool. So come on, guys. We've been talking about IX for a long time, and I know last week we mentioned not having fail sauce in your server stack. So you definitely need to get in touch with the guys over at IX and make sure you're running the right hardware and get stuff built to do exactly what you need done. Sure. And just don't buy stuff off the shelf. It's been sitting there forever that's not tuned and tweaked and customized to your particular workload. Let the guys at iXsystems make that happen for you. Their sales engineers will walk you through the entire process, probably know more about it than you do, which is a good thing because they've done so many of these and for all kinds of specialized customers and whatnot. So bring them a challenge. I think they actually enjoy it.
Fun stuff. Basically everything from like the tiniest, cheapest machine that you need, for a router at your house through, the machines. It's like, I need to fill a rack with storage and I need to do it, quickly. Because that's the other thing. Well, like we said, you're not buying something off the shelf. They're going to custom build everything to order exactly how you want it. But at the same time, they have reputable on-time delivery. If they say this will take 8 business days, then in 8 business days, you get the notification from FedEx that it's on the way. And, that being able to trust that, hey, I need a server, I'm going to order it, and you guys are going to have it shipped by this date, right? Being able to trust that they actually will do that makes a big difference. And also the accurate quotes. When you get a quote for a server and you're like, okay, I want to buy it now, the price is what it says on the quote, not, oh, well, our quote forgot to include, there's the, this fee and that fee and this other thing. And, do you want a power cable with it? No, when you get a quote from IX, it's for exactly everything you need. And it's, there's no tricks. That's the big difference.
I'm not going to nickel and dime you on all that. Yeah, iXsystems, it's just you go from a very depersonalized experience to something where you get to know the guy, your sales rep, and it's more of a name basis association here, and you can call up and tell them this is exactly what I'm trying to do, or my work or my company wants to do some unique new project, and I need a lot of memory or a lot of CPUs or a crazy amount of NICs. They've probably already done something like that. So the more details you get them, the better your experience will be.
They've done basically every different thing I might have needed to a bigger extreme than I ever have. It's like, I need some 10 gigabit NICs in my server. It's like, well, we have this one where we built that has 24 10 gigabit NICs. It's like, I don't need quite that many. Right. I need lots of RAM. It's like, well, there's lots and then there's lots of RAM. It's like, well, we have this design that fits 6 terabytes of RAM. It's like, I don't actually need that much RAM.
Yeah, it's better that you just tell them, I need to run a database and I needed to do this and have this kind of performance. Then they'll figure out how much RAM and what kind of specs you need to make that all happen.
They'll do whatever it takes to
that's work. Yeah, definitely. So again, that's going to be iXsystems.com/BSD Now. Go there and let them know that we sent you when you talk to the guys. We're joined now by Ed Schouten, who's here to talk to us about a cloud ABI, which is going to be interesting, and looking forward to hearing this. So first of all, welcome to the show today, Ed.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. As I said, this is actually the first time I'm talking about cloud ABI in public, so it's going to be interesting, I guess.
This is going to be awesome. This is why you guys stay tuned to BSD Now, so you can hear this kind of cutting edge stuff before it even makes it out anywhere else. This is really cool, Ed. But before we can get folks into cloud ABI, we got to make them wait a little bit. Tell us about your history. How did you get involved with BSD in general?
Yeah, so when I was going to secondary school, I think I was 13 or 14 years old, I wanted to try something different on my computer. So I tried to install SUSE Linux on my computer. Mm-hmm. I think this was version 5 or 6. I don't know it exactly anymore. But I was actually the unluckiest person ever, because the computer that I had, it had an ISDN modem in it. So that didn't really work on Linux at the time. And
I also tell you, it sucked under Windows too.
Yeah. On the Linux, on Windows, it sometimes worked. And I also had a Voodoo graphics card, I think, and it didn't really work. So back then, I really hated Linux. I thought it was a stupid system because it looked like DOS to me. Didn't have X11, no internet. So I switched back to Unix and completely sort of forgot about it. Many years later, when I went to the University of Applied Sciences, there was this Unix users group, and the building I went to didn't have any Wi-Fi except at this Unix users group. So I became a member of the Unix users group just to get free Wi-Fi. So
yay!
But after using Wi-Fi, I also got interested in what they were actually doing over there, and there were a couple of Linux people there, a couple of BSD people there, sort of a really large variety of different Unix systems over there. I started using Linux, and then after that, I switched to FreeBSD, and I've been using a mixture of all these operating systems over the last couple of years, and FreeBSD is one that sort of sticks most.
Okay.
So how did you end up becoming a developer?
Yeah. I think it was back in 2007, late 2007, that we had all these emails flying by on the FreeBSD mailing list, all those SMP safety to-do lists. I think Robert Watson was also posting those proactively, and also a couple of other people. And there was this one entry sort of in that table that never got updated, and it was to make the FreeBSD TTY layer SMP safe. So I thought, why doesn't anyone want to look into this? It's actually quite important that this gets patched up. Quite a lot of processors use it. So I started looking into the code, and then I realized why nobody was looking into it, because it was actually quite a awful piece of code, and sort of patched up over the decades just to sort of limp along. So back then I had to write my bachelor thesis, and in the Netherlands that typically means that you sort of work for a company for 4 to 6 months or something like that, and then basically you can sort of you just have to work for them and write a report about that. So I was really lucky. I started working for a company called Snow, and my supervisor was a sort of a real BSD addict. He was also really helpful, sort of organizing EuroBSDCon and that kind of stuff. He gave me a couple of proposals to work on, but then I said, I know something else. You're a FreeBSD fan. I'm a FreeBSD fan. If I look at the SMP safety to-do list, I see that the TTY layer still needs some patching up. So basically, that allowed me to just hack on that for half a year. It just, it was a really awesome project. And they also funded that project. They sent me over to BSD Can. They paid for my plane ticket and everything.
Nice.
It's really, really awesome of them. So yeah, that's how I got involved. Started hacking the FreeBSD kernel. And then a couple of months later, I got my commit bit and upstreamed it. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Right. So you came on the show today to talk about Cloud ABI. So can you tell us, what that is and how it got started?
So about half a year ago, while I still had my previous job, I was sort of doing some hacking in my spare time. Just one of the things I was working on was sort of a really weird experimental storage service, something like the Hask daemon. That's FreeBSD. But basically, sort of a bit more distributed and encrypted and signed, and just this really weird distributed Git-like file system, you could say.
Sure.
Basically, just to experiment with distributed consensus algorithms like Paxos. So one of the things that I wanted to do while writing this was actually capsicamize this, because I thought this is like an ideal piece of software that you could capsicamize, right? You just have some incoming network connections, and the only thing you need to do is read bits from disk, write bits to disk. So I started using Capsicum for this project, and I noticed that Capsicum is a really nice piece of software. I really enjoy using it. In my opinion, it has a couple of sort of small flaws to it. Basically, what it tries to do, it tries to smash this pure capability-based computing environment on top of Unix. And what you get is you get these really weird bugs in programs that shouldn't be there. So, for example, I use the crypto library just to sign off changes that I would write to disk. And what I noticed was that if I would call cap enter, which is basically the call that allows you to say, sandbox this process. If you would call it too early, it would actually try to open dev random the first time you would use the crypto library. That would fail because it's sandboxed, and then it would fall back to weak entropy. So that's not good. That's really not good. So what I noticed is that the way we do Capsicum right now, it actually makes it not that easy to actually get software working reliably. In this really small controlled environment, TCP dump, SSHD, piece of software that don't have a lot of dependencies, it's a really good tool. But as soon as you start to get all these third-party dependencies, crypto libraries, image compressing, decompressing libraries, it might actually be a bit harder to get it working. And that's why I thought by myself, there needs to be this pure capability-based runtime environment. So that's basically how this project started. I started working on this back in, I think, September last year, and I decided I want to work full time on this and actually see where it goes.
Okay. So why would somebody use this, or what does it do for somebody? I know you've talked about capability environments, and how does this relate to maybe virtualization or other containment frameworks?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what is really nice about Cloud ABI is that it allows you to write software that is sort of safe to run on an operating system without using virtualization. I mean, if you would have a normal FreeBSD installation and someone would give you a random binary, it's actually quite unsafe to run this. You can actually run it inside of a jail, then it's already quite a lot safer. But you basically
you're running a random binary.
So. Yeah, exactly. You just want to use a virtualization system for this to get this running. And basically, what Cloud ABI does is it actually limits. It's a pure capability-based environment, so you can actually really precisely control what the application can and cannot do. And this makes it possible to just run these untrusted programs directly on top of a Unix kernel without needing any virtualization. You won't have any sort of additional CPU overhead that you have from when you use virtualization. Sorry, someone's bothering me on Hangouts. Let's see if I can mute for a couple of hours.
Right.
Yes. Now it should be all right. Yes. Sorry for the distraction.
No problem.
So you wouldn't need to use any virtualization framework in theory. So in practice, unfortunately, we're not there yet. One of the things that's always quite complex about having no virtualization at all is that you can't actually constrain resource usage as well. That's something that I haven't addressed at all, but hopefully we'll see some extensions pop up that, you have these APIs where you can say, I just want to build this tiny container that sort of restricts resource usage. But apart from that, it could be a replacement for virtualization.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, there's some work with the RCTL and our account for limiting resources in a FreeBSD jail or something that can work per process as well as per jail. That might be able to do some of that.
Yeah, exactly. It's also a matter of just exposing APIs into Cloud ABI. And what I'm really doing is I'm sort of cherry picking all the things we can expose. So one of the ideas behind Cloud ABI is it's such a compact binary interface. It should be easily possible to add support for Cloud ABI binaries to other operating systems. So you compile a binary once against this non-existent artificial operating system called Cloud ABI. But instead, you can just run it on a variety of operating systems. So I actually have to be careful that the APIs that we expose into Cloud ABI, that they're actually APIs that we can sort of reasonably expect people to sort of implement on these other operating systems. If you would really put all those sort of FreeBSD specific APIs in there, it would be really hard to get it working on say Linux.
Right.
Mm-hmm. No, makes sense.
So could you take us through an example scenario on how we might actually use Cloud ABI to make an application or a service or something, or what the actual steps are?
The point is there's still a lot of development going on with Cloud ABI. So right now it's not that trivial to actually run a lot of high-level software on top of it, and it's not ready yet in a certain way. It still needs a lot of attention. But one interesting use case that I could think of is that you could basically start your own cloud computing provider. Mm-hmm. And there's just a drag and drop form on the page, and people can just drag programs on top of the browser page. And what happens is that at the back end, those processes get started up automatically. And what happens is the program only gets like a networking connection provided. It gets some scratch base, a directory where it can write some temp files, maybe a file descriptor to, say, a log file. And then this web service can just run automatically, and it wouldn't need any systems administration. It's really, the cloud provider can just start it up. It can scale it up automatically because it could just run multiple instances at the same time on different servers. And those are the kinds of use cases that I'm foreseeing. So really these, micro APIs for running cloud computing services, where you have this really tiny restricted environment that only provides you a couple of capabilities, and that should be sufficient to just run an entire web service.
Right, kind of. Nice. So instead of the current cloud model where you get a virtual machine, which you have to do all this other stuff, with Cloud ABI, you just provide a single application and it runs on the platform.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And also sort of a more futuristic use case that I'm thinking about is, what's really nice about this model is that processes, they don't, normally when you take a look at a normal Unix service for Unix, the first thing it does, it sort of tries to acquire resources, open a network connection, allocate, or open certain files or directories that you need to access. And then only after that start processing. With Cloud ABI, those resources are all provided up front. So what you could actually do with this model is you could build sort of more higher level cluster management systems. So say you have a sort of a more complex service that's not just a single web service, but it's a database service, some web front end, some batch processing, just a whole bunch of related tools that all form this single web service. What you could actually do is you could just maybe somehow create like a nice web IDE or something where you could just drag and drop all those applications, tie them together, basically say, here's an arrow, incoming web request, hook them up to this process, then hook this front-end process up to the database, etc. And then you could just spawn all those processes in one go. So you could just have like a visual way of doing systems administration, where you get better insight on how much traffic goes across all these channels, and maybe you see like these bottlenecks, and then you can sort of start scaling up. So sort of like a graphical systems administrating tool. That would be nice. Like the holy grail, something that I'm foreseeing. But I mean, that's really just an application on top, and I'm just so focused on the infrastructure at the bottom right now that it's simply not there yet. But
you got to build the sandbox first before somebody makes the castles.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
Okay. Well, so you mentioned a little bit about Capsicum. So how does this all work with Cloud ABI, and how does that work with, if it is using Capsicum, how does that work for, say, like a Linux port or something, or maybe a place where Capsicum isn't?
Yeah, so what's really interesting, and this is also something that's brand new, is 2 weeks ago, I actually started porting this system over to NetBSD, just to see how it works. And it's actually pretty far, because in those 14 days time, I started exactly 2 weeks ago, I've got 95% of all my unit tests passing. So it's pretty nice. But basically, even though the API that's exposed for user space is the same as FreeBSD's Capsicum, and even though it actually builds on top of the Capsicum bits that are in FreeBSD, you don't actually need a full Capsicum implementation to support all of this stuff. So in NetBSD, so in practice, it will mean that it sort of behaves the same as Capsicum on FreeBSD. It's implemented a bit differently. So what I do there is I just make sure that all those system calls, they just behave the same way as if they would on FreeBSD if they use caps.
Sure.
So, for example, sandboxing, locking up processes in certain directories. With Capsicum, if you have a file descriptor to a directory, you're locked up in that directory. On FreeBSD, that's implemented, as a global switch. If your program is in capabilities mode, you're locked up. Otherwise, you can take a look at the entire file system. On NetBSD, this is done differently because Cloud AV processes are simply always locked up. And basically, I've just made some tiny changes to how path name resolving is done. That if it's a Cloud AV process, AVI process, you're locked up. So in practice, it will behave the same, but the actual underlying implementation might be completely different, between operating systems.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So from your BSD Can Talk summary, it says an implementation for FreeBSD of Cloud AVI already exists, and an implementation of Linux is being worked on. This would allow users of such computing platforms to run exactly the same executable without targeting a specific operating system and without having to recompile. So this means, as a vendor, I could make an application, release a binary, and they could just drop it on FreeBSD or Linux or NetBSD, and it would just run?
Yeah, exactly.
How does that work?
So that's actually really it's quite simple if you actually know the details behind it. So basically, every ELF executable, so on Linux and on BSD, they all use the same file format because that's all standardized. It was developed by SCO and a couple of other Unix vendors a couple of decades ago, and in the ELF header, so really in the first couple of bytes of the executable, there's always a field reserved that indicates the operating system for which this binary is intended. So if you try to run a Linux binary on FreeBSD, the FreeBSD kernel will use that field to actually not run the process as if it's a FreeBSD binary, but run it through the Linuxolator, Compat Linux. The other way around, if you would try to run a FreeBSD binary on Linux or Solaris or HBUX, it would fail to execute and say, this binary is not intended for this operating system. Please go away. And what I've done is I was actually quite lucky. I contacted SEO, or sort of the UXS Global, the new company that oversees their operations, and I asked them, so what does it take to just register my own operating system? And it turns out that procedure is actually really easy. You simply just provide them your contact details, and they just give you the next number. So FreeBSD is FreeBSD is number 9, Linux is number 3 or 4, I think, and Cloud ABI is number 17. We're just operating system number 17, and all those applications are just compiled against this non-existent operating system called Cloud ABI. That's how it works. Yeah.
Cool.
No, that's really neat.
I think that'll be really handy in the future. Just have these applications that are just cross-platform natively and not require.
Is this a universal binary format? This is crazy.
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So you did mention porting it over to NetBSD, but I assume this could work on all the BSDs. And what would need to be done on any of the specific ones to make it go there?
Yeah, so actually, because I ported it to NetBSD, I started porting it to NetBSD two weeks ago. I can basically explain what I did. So first of all, what's really nice about Cloud ABI is that I'm really using test-driven development to develop all this code. So right now I've got 650 unit tests. I think I've written those over the course of half a year, and you just start writing code until all the tests pass in theory. And how did I do this for NetBSD? So the first thing that you need to do is you actually need to make sure that the NetBSD kernel understands these binaries. You run /my binary, and normally it says, go away, I don't support these. You need to patch up the kernel to actually know this brand. And this is actually different how it's done between the BSDs. I think probably OpenBSD and NetBSD are the same, but it's different between FreeBSD and NetBSD. Basically, you just register new brand. There's like an internal KPI for that to do that. And what you do is you when you register a brand, you have to provide an entire separate system call table. So you provide boilerplate system calls. Cloud ABI has about 60 system calls. I just added 60 broken system calls that would only return enosys.
Sure.
Put them all in place, hook them up to the brand structure, and then you register the brand. Then you can start executing those binaries. But they won't do anything, of course, because all the system calls are unimplemented. And then you just start hacking on all those system calls. The first thing you get is the unit testing suite starts up because you managed to implement the right system call. Managed to print a string to your terminal. Then it crashes because it can't allocate memory. So then you start implementing mmap, and mmap works, and it does some more stuff. But what was actually the most annoying thing was that the unit testing suite spawns a thread pool. Because I've got 650 unit tests, you want to execute them quickly, so spawn 8 threads and then run all those tests. So that basically means that the first thing you need to implement before the unit testing suite runs is multi-threading, which is not easy. So you really have to do it in the opposite direction. Things that usually come last, hey, let's do multi-threading. You have to do it first, unfortunately, because the unit testing suite depends on this. But you could, in theory, turn it off as well, just to make it easier. Just run it single threaded, and then you could sort of bypass it. But I decided not to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So how does someone actually write a program to this Cloud ABI?
Yeah. So what's really nice is that almost all of the toolchain patches have been upstreamed already. I could talk about it in a bit more detail because that's also an interesting topic. But what you basically do is you just check out the latest Clang LLVM from SVN and install it on your system. And as soon as you rename the Clang binary to x86 unknown Cloud ABI Clang, so just a GNU triple followed by Clang or CC, then it automatically acts as a cross-compiler. So support for Cloud ABI is already upstreamed into Clang. I've done the same thing with binutils. So if you just follow the regular steps of creating a cross-linker assembler binutils, then you already get a properly functioning set of tools for Cloud ABI. So actually getting the cross-compiler and the linker assembler is actually really easy. And after that's done, you can already start compiling Cloud libc, which is the standard C library for Cloud ABI that I've written. And after that's been installed, you can actually start to compile other interesting libraries like libc++, compiler RT, the math fallback routines needed to do 128-bit division on certain platforms, that kind of stuff. And a couple of other interesting libraries like the libunwind, which you need for C++ exception handling. You can actually get a more complete toolchain that actually does C++ as well. Unfortunately, I haven't managed to upstream all of the libc++ patches yet, but as soon as that happens, you already have a fully functional C++ stack.
And then so is there any special things I have to do in the code that I'm writing to make it work with Cloud ABI?
Yeah, so Cloud libc only implements the functions that make sense in a capability-based environment. So saying, I want to open this random path name on the system, that simply won't work. So the open system call is actually missing. That breaks a lot of software, unfortunately.
Sure.
So what you just do is you just start compiling your software, and you just get a bunch of compiler errors, and you just iterate over them. You have to make the code capability aware. Yeah. So the reason why I went for this approach is that I mentioned previously that you had this library that tried to open dev-urandom and it failed, and then it fell back to weak entropy. That's the reason why things that do depend on global namespaces simply have to disappear. If they're there, code would compile silently. That's something that I don't want.
Right.
In the future, it might be the case that I might be adding some libraries to make porting easier, so that you can basically say, I do want to have an open system call, but don't use the root directory of the system that you can't access, but use this directory instead that you explicitly provided a file descriptor. and that suddenly all these global namespaces start to work again. But that's something that's still on the to-do list and sort of needs to be crystallized, before I start working on this.
Cool.
Okay.
So how can people get involved in the project, or is there anything you're looking for help with, or?
Yeah, there are a couple of interesting things people could do. So first of all, I want people just to test this. Try installing it, and the first thing you might notice is there are flaws in the documentation. Help me get those fixed. After you get it working, you discover that the simplest example seg faults on your workstation, and that there's a weird bug in the C library. I really just want people to test this stuff. Try it out. Start using it on FreeBSD, try to use the NetBSD port and actually see what's missing there. There are a couple of features still missing. Try to port your favorite application. If you have a small pet project, try to get it working in this environment. It's really just, I only want people to use this. And if people start using this, then hopefully people get sort of motivated out of themselves, and things will be all right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how are you personally using Cloud ABI? Do you have any interesting things you're doing with it already?
So that's a bit of a problem. If the only thing I wanted to do was, run my cute little storage service on top of this.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I don't have any time for that anymore because this is already consuming a lot of time. So
sure.
Maybe one day, once Cloud ABI is finished, I might go back to hacking on those kinds of things. But in the meantime, I'm, during the day, I'm really just trying to get it working on different operating systems, running the test suite a lot of times to actually find all these race conditions, adding more features to the C library, preparing slides for conferences. I'm really doing a lot of random things. But I'm not a user myself. That's a bit of a shame.
Was there anything else you wanted to talk about before we let you go?
A couple of things. So first of all, I'm going to give a talk at BSD as well. So if you happen to be at the conference, please drop by, ask me a lot of questions, talk to me. My goal is to get this upstreamed into FreeBSD, so I really want people to understand what it is before I upstream it. So please talk to me. If you happen to live in the Netherlands, next month I'm giving a talk at the Dutch Unix Users Group Conference in Utrecht. So if you happen to live in the Netherlands or Belgium or Germany close to the Dutch border, feel free to drop by.
Okay. Well, nice. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this today, Ed. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and I also really appreciate being here. As I mentioned, it's the first time I'm actually talking about this in public. So yeah.
Well, make sure you keep publishing change logs and little bits of what you're doing with it, so we can get it in the news roundups and future episodes.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. Maybe I should start like a blog or
right.
Something like that.
Yeah, this new feature landed. Like that's gold, man. We got to put that out there. Well, cool.
I think this project seems really interesting, and I'm kind of excited about it. So, thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I really hope that it sort of comes off the ground. It's going to be hard getting existing software running on this. It's not the easy way forward. Jails and virtualization, it's all these incremental changes, but this is, sort of flipping the table upside down. Let's do something aggressive and see where it goes, and maybe it sticks. I hope it sticks actually, and
it'll start small. I imagine you'll have small apps and libraries get added, and before you know it, like you got a whole stack of things. So
as soon as a large application like MySQL or Nginx would start working on this, that's probably the day that I'm happy.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Well, cool. Well, thanks so much, Ed, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a few weeks in Canada.
Yeah, see you there.
Okay, now it's time for the news roundup, folks. But before we head there, of course, we do want to mention DigitalOcean this week, where they're still running that coupon code FreeBSD Now, which will get you a $10 credit, where you can go ahead and start spinning up some droplets there, get FreeBSD in them, or if you refer back a couple episodes, you can look at the other way. You can put OpenBSD up in the cloud there, which is pretty slick, and you can start playing with that right away. So Alan, what do you want to tell us about DigitalOcean? What do you have on the screen?
I'm just showing they have a little GIF animation of how easy it is to get started. You just log in, create your account, and be like, I want a virtual machine. And then you just decide what size virtual machine, what you want to call it, where you want it to be, what operating system you want from a whole huge list, or you can actually choose specific applications. They have like pre-built droplets for WordPress and so on. And then, within 55 seconds, it's up and running, and you SSH into it, and you're good to go.
Nice. And, of course, they provide a full API, so you can programmatically build and tear down VMs as well. I mean, just lots of neat stuff, different locations across the world.
Including the new one in Germany.
Yeah. I mean, it's really neat, and seeing more providers support BSD is just awesome.
Yes.
So definitely, if you guys need to set something up in the cloud, go over to DigitalOcean.com and just get that spun up right now, and use that coupon code so you can even play with it before you've put a dime in it and see if it'll do what you need it to do.
You have to pay $5 first, and then you get the $10 credit. That's there not because they don't like you. It's there because otherwise people were using the $10 coupons to launch denial service attacks and stuff.
Nefarious things.
But basically for $5 you get 3 months, which is a pretty damn good deal.
Oh, that's fantastic. And, that's a great deal.
They're high-end Xeon systems for the hosts, and they're all SSD-backed storage. So usually the slowest thing on a virtual machine is the disk, and having it all backed by SSDs solves that problem.
Yes, it does. And the lower end VM even comes with a terabyte of transfer,
which is a lot of bandwidth for $5.
That is a lot. So come on, guys. There's really no reason not to. Go get signed up at DigitalOcean.com and spin up those VMs now. And of course, we'd like to hear your success stories as well. So if you're doing something neat there, let us know.
I set up the. We needed a status page for Scale Engine to post announcements for upcoming maintenance and stuff in case. The main just happens to be on our web server, so our website's not going to be up for us to have a post or whatever, and I don't believe in relying on Twitter to make announcements. So I needed, a status page set up somewhere that was outside of Scale Engine's infrastructure, and so it was quite easy to spin up a FreeBSD instance over at DigitalOcean and set it up. We got an IP address. It supports IPv6. Installed Nginx and my status software, and it was up and running, and it's been running great.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, well, as we move into the news roundup here, we got some cool router information to get us started with. So we got a neat article here talking about OpenHRC, which stands for the Open Household Router Contraption, which I just like that they got the word contraption in there. That's really neat. In short, they basically have a set of bootstrapping scripts which will allow you to turn a vanilla OpenBSD install into a feature-rich gateway device. So it takes uses some Ansible playbooks for configuration and allows a more mass deployment type of setup, which is pretty slick. But everything is configured via a simple text file, and you end up with a local NTP server, a DHCP server, of course, and then obviously your firewall. I mean, what's the point without that? And then you get a local caching DNS resolver, and it even does DNSSEC validation.
Wow.
So that's definitely very useful.
And they point over to their GitHub where you can see all the source code.
Yeah, it's all open source. So yeah, you can read through what's actually being changed and what it's doing to your OpenBSD install. So definitely take a look at that. And we even have a link to a video guide to the entire process. So if you're more of a visual guy and need to watch the video to see how it works, take a look at that. That'll walk you through it.
Wow, that looks really cool.
Okay. Yeah, that is really neat.
Definitely, for the type of person that doesn't want to go through our whole router tutorial and build it themselves, it's like, whammo, done.
Yeah, this is like the cheat sheet. Here's the script. It does it.
Also, it's an Ansible script, so it's also great for, hey, I need to build 100 of these.
Yeah. This will be nice. Okay, so we get some other router news this week. We have a new OpenSense release has dropped. 15.1.10 has been released, and we have the link to the notes for that. But if you're looking for more of a pre-built and ready-to-go option, this is definitely one way you can do that. And this particular release drops some of the legacy patches they had first got from pfSense, and it's aiming to stay a little closer to mainline FreeBSD source code is part of what they're doing here. And going along with this theme, they've redone how they do ports, and now they're kept totally in sync with the regular upstream FreeBSD port straight.
Cool.
binary packages using package-ng, of course, are now signed using the fingerprint style method. They've improved various GUI menus and, of course, fixed a number of bugs. And also, interesting, they have nano-BSD-based images available now. So if you have a little bit lower-end hardware or something
where
small,
you want to write the installed system to an SD card and then stick it in the device instead of running the install off a USB stick. Yeah,
that's pretty nice. So take a look at that. And they also did a hotfix shortly after, which included a small fix for VLANs. And we'll have there's a Twitter link to that if you want to see what that was about. But definitely check that out. Let us know if you guys are using that and what you think. Okay, an IBM WorkPad Z50 and NetBSD. Hey, we got some more interesting hardware here. So, of course, before we had the infamous netbook fad a while back, IBM had a handheld PDA device that pretty much looked the same there. Looks like back in '99, they released their WorkPad Z50, and we'll have a link to that. And it was, of course, running Windows CE back in the day, sporting a 131 megahertz MIPS CPU, 16 megabytes of memory, and a 640 by 480 display. Wow,
only 16-bit color.
That's right. So, of course, since I mentioned NetBSD, you know where this is going, and this article is going to tell you about installing NetBSD on it, since it runs on pretty much everything now.
I love the quote here. It says, what prevented me from taking my pristine WorkPad Z50 to the local electronics recycling facility was NetBSD.
He says, well, you got to read the rest of the quote there.
With little effort, it's possible to install a recent version of NetBSD and even get X Windows running and all the stuff.
X Windows at 640 by 480. Wow, that's a blast from the past, but interesting. So the author also got a package source up and running on it too, and cleverly used some of the distcc command to offload some of the compiling jobs to get something a bit more modern on it. And we've also got a couple of YouTube videos of the boot up process and running X on it, which it may take a while to watch since it's not exactly a speedy little device. It is a tad bit old at this point, but still, interestingly enough, these are a lot of the cool things you see at conferences where they bring these kind of things out, and it's like, I haven't seen one of those in forever, and it still runs, and it's running NetBSD. How crazy is that? Okay, so we got some FreeBSD news next. FreeBSD from the trenches, and this is over at the FreeBSD Foundation's blog. And they've posted another in their From the Trenches series, which kind of details FreeBSD in real-world use cases. Yep. So in this installment, we're looking at Glenn Barber's talking about how he sets up all his laptops with ZFS and Jelly. So it looks like while the installer, of course, allows for an automatic ZFS layout, Glenn notes it's not exactly a one-size-fits-all things. And, of course, he wants to go through and do things manually, so he's going to show you how he does that.
What's interesting is
so what's he doing different from yours?
Well, what's interesting is, while I wrote the installer with the help from Devin Teskey, that's not the layout I use either.
Oh, well, there you go.
That one was based on what would work best with boot environments and so on, whereas my setup's usually, on my servers, it's usually catered to more how we use the machines at Scale Engine. So there's a bunch of extra data sets, and packages are more separate from the operating system, whereas on most people's machines, they want those to be kind of in sync and so on, right? And he says, as one of the release engineers, I find it essential that, certain things that he has to test both ways, his way and the installer, because with using being on release engineering, it's you got to make sure both of them work.
That's right. Well, this is pretty neat, though. It looks like he has each command explain what you're doing here. He walks you through the process of doing an encrypted installation on your root zpool as well. So that, I assume that's still with an unencrypted kernel somewhere, right? Or is he using Okay, that's right. But cool, that is really neat. So if you guys want to see how you could do that and how he rolls his laptop with encryption and ZFS, that is definitely slick. Okay, now next up, we have some Dragonfly news, which makes me a tad bit jealous, I will admit. So it looks like Dragonfly BSD has won the race to get to the Intel Broadwell graphics driver.
Yes. So their drivers are updated to Linux 3.14, whereas the FreeBSD is hoping within the next month and a half to be up to 3.8. And that's 3.8 is where Linux is currently. Or sorry, not Linux, OpenBSD. So it's like FreeBSD is kind of trailing. OpenBSD's got Haswell, but not Broadwell. And Dragonfly has surpassed us all and is all the way up to date.
That's crazy. Who's doing that over at Dragonfly? Stop that.
It's Francois Turgeot. Or Turgeot.
Oh, man. Well, that's cool. Hey, if you want to come over and help out on the
exactly.
side at some point.
Dragonfly is not that much different, is it? Come on, please.
Right,
help.
right. Yeah, I mean, we will accept patches from Dragonfly developers.
Yes.
But it looks like they're planning to commit this to the main tree very soon, but they have a Git branch you can start trying out right now. And, of course, it adds a bunch of other bug fixes for other cards aside from Broadwell.
Plus, also enables the RC6 power savings by default, except for on some chips that don't support it.
Yes. Well, I'm, like I said, very jealous. Very jealous, because I know the new Nooks are coming out here soon. They're going to have Broadwell as well.
And I have a Haswell Nook.
So cool.
And the reason I have that i3 one, even though it cost about the same as the Haswell one, that was i5, was that I could, because it's Ivy Bridge, so I could use it for FreeBSD.
Yep. That's right. That's right. So, well, 10.2 can't come soon enough. Hopefully the Haswell lands, and then because of the fixes they made, hopefully that makes the future patches much smaller and faster. So,
hopefully we can
fingers crossed, looking forward to it.
Hopefully we can catch up
somebody
and
make my day.
learn from Dragonfly.
Yes, yes. So, exciting stuff. Okay, before we head into our comments and questions for the week, of course, we got to mention another sponsor, which is going to be Tarsnap. And the URL for that will be tarsnap.com/BSD Now, where you can go right now and get signed up with an account pretty much by the time we're done talking about it. So you have something to show us today, I think.
Well, just I saw from Colin on Twitter, he just posted to the Tarsnap mailing list, because how many services to use that have their own mailing list.
Right.
Some technical details of a performance problem they were having during March and April. And, while that part's slightly interesting, it just kind of details some of how the parts of Tarsnap work. And so if you're at all interested in just how large-scale systems work, or, postmortems on any time there's a service having a problem or whatever, you should definitely check it out. It's a good post detailing, what was the performance problems they were having, and what I think the 4 different causes of it turned out to be, and how they solved each of those.
Okay, nice.
But mostly it just kind of shows how transparent the service is, and how it's that much different from other services you might look at.
Provider, Tarsnap, you get access to the source code, so you can go audit it yourself and verify that it's really doing what it's supposed to be doing, what they claim that it does, and then I trust that a little more, right? So I know that my data offsite really is encrypted, not just that they promise it is.
So I think for Colin, that Cloud ABI might be an interesting target, because it could be, here's a binary that just works on every platform. Although, part of the point is, if you're really serious about Tarsnap, you're going to get the source code and compile it yourself, because you want to make sure that the binary you get is generated by you from source code that you are sure doesn't contain any nonsense. But
well, you got to love that they give you the ability to have that level, apparently.
Exactly.
How many places give you access to compiling it yourself to make sure
it
works?
None. Not even one.
Right. So you guys, no reason not to use Tarsnap. You're just not going to get that kind of feature anywhere else.
And that price, I still have not managed to spend a quarter. I'm trying, but Colin doesn't even want my quarters.
Back up more data. Right. So again, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Sign up, and if you talk to them over there, let them know that we sent you.
Yes, please.
Okay, so first up in the feedback this week, we got a Boston writes in with some ZFS issues, and it's a pretty long email with lots of copy and paste here. So I'll get us started, and I'll let you kind of look through the technical stuff here, Alan. But he says, I had, or perhaps still have, a FreeNAS ZFS problem. He says, I've searched online, but no useful help. You're the best ZFS guru I know. I hope you can help me with my unavailable FreeNAS ZFS problems. He says, I was copying some files from FreeNAS to my computer when suddenly the transfer stopped. I was the only one using the FreeNAS at the time. I don't do upgrades. I didn't replace any disks. The scrub of the pool happened 15 days ago, and the scrub of pool FreeNAS boot occurred 1 day ago. At the time when the transfer stopped, he said, I got the emails. ZFS volume, ZFS state is unavailable. One or more devices has experienced an error resulting in data corruption. Applications may be affected. And then he posts some of the other critical alerts. And then he goes through his details. He's running FreeNAS 9.3 stable, 6 disks in a mirror, ECC 8 gigabytes of memory. Says he couldn't log in through the browser. He got an error empty response. He couldn't access FreeNAS through Samba. He tried SSH. It asked me for a username and password and then stopped. No command worked. There was nothing written in front of the cursor. Ping worked. So he said when he connected to the screen to the box, the screen showed this, a bunch of VM fault pager read errors.
Yeah, so normally what that is so some, there wasn't enough RAM, so stuff has been paged out to the swap, and then the hard drive that the swap was on has disappeared or stopped responding or whatever, and you can't swap that data back in, and now chunks of RAM that the program depends on are now lost, and yeah, there's nothing you can do there except for reboot, basically. So it sounds like one or more of your disks has died. The message saying the pool is unavailable usually means that you've lost an entire VDAV. So further down, he has some outputs of his zpool status, and the weird thing is everything looks fine in his zpool status.
It does.
Normally, a pool, if any one of those 6 disks there died, your pool would be degraded but still online. It would have to be 2 of those mirrors being dead at once in order for your pool to become unavailable. Or all the disks in any one of those mirrors dying at once would cause your system to be unavailable.
Sure.
Now, he's mentioned it's got some output here about permanent errors, meaning that both copies of something would have had to have been bad, which is strange.
Odd. Yeah. I don't know if he didn't post dmessage output or var log messages. I'd be curious to see what's in there.
So basically, it went all screwy, and then when he rebooted, everything was back to normal. Then it's a little hard to follow all the stuff.
Yeah. It almost sounds like it ran out of swap and memory entirely.
That can happen, although, but specifically the read error from the swap is the part that seems strange. So yeah, if it's working now, then you're okay. That unavailable errors usually would mean that 2 of your disks, or all of the disks in one of those mirror sets, disconnected or disappeared, and that caused that. That's not something that would normally happen unless like the whole controller gave up on you or something. It's very it depends on there's a lot of things that it could have been. It's hard to say. Once you reboot, all that state's gone, but as long as it's still working, I think it looks okay. You might want to run a scrub and see if it'll clean up some of those permanently.
This may be something worth posting on the FreeNAS forums as well. Just to maybe have a FreeNAS developer or somebody get an eye on it and say, oh, this looks like it could be this or whatever. Like you said, maybe a controller or something.
Yeah, the weird one is,
that is odd.
It showed at one point, he shows, and it has one checksum error on one disk, which makes sense if you have any files that are screwy. But then when he ran it a little bit later, that checksum is back to 0, which normally wouldn't happen unless you manually ran zpool clear. Although maybe the FreeNAS background stuff does. Once it alerts you about the checksum error, it clears it so that if it sees that number being non-zero again, that it knows that it's a new failure.
Yeah, this may be something worth sending into those guys over there, just to get other eyes on it and some commentary. But interesting problem.
But as long as it's back up and running, you should be fine. It sounds like something went strange.
Somewhat sideways, right? Professional opinion there. Yeah. Okay, so Hunter writes in next, asking about modules and screen readers. He said, "Greetings, guys. My email consists of 2 things that I've been thinking over since I picked up the show 2 weeks ago. If I'm understanding things correctly, is there a way to run Linux applications in a compatibility layer on FreeBSD?" Yes, there is. He asked if this works with the kernel. No, unless you're running it in virtualization or something. He says, in Linux, we have a screen reader called SpeakUp, which uses a software bridge to call eSpeakUp to interface with the eSpeakUp speech synthesizer. Is it possible to have the kernel module for Linux be built into FreeBSD's kernel, or any BSD, actually? I don't think so. That would
really
take some porting. Yeah. Or does the compatibility layer not run that deep? No, it just exposes the syscalls and whatnot.
It basically emulates parts of the Linux kernel. So it can't really work with a kernel module.
But no, you wouldn't load a module or anything. He says, the reason I'm asking is I'm going to try and get Orca to work on PCBSD with a friend's assistance, and I need a fallback in case things go bad. If this is not possible, do you guys know of any screen readers that are used on the CLI? I can't say that I do off the top of my head. I mean, you have Orca's one. There was something else we looked at even trying to port over at one point. I think it's in the ports tree, but we never configured it. There's a few different screen readers out there. I have no idea if it works on the CLI, though. The second,
we met that one blind user at MeetBSD, although we didn't really talk about. I think he was using even like a piece of hardware or something that worked with a serial console. I forget.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how you would do that in this case. I'm sure it'll come to me later after the show. I'll remember what the other program was that does that. But he says the second component is in regard to getting a rolling release distribution of FreeBSD. Is there a repo that gives me the latest packages and ports without having to worry about switching between operating system versions, such as 10.11 or 10.22 or whatever?
Basically, the way FreeBSD works, other than something that has a kernel module like VirtualBox, the packages from 10 anything will run on FreeBSD 10 anything else.
Sure.
So you can take packages that were compiled for 10.0 and 10.1 and run them on 10.2 without a problem.
So it sounds like he's talking about PCBSD though, because he's talking about 10.1.1
yes,
and whatnot. So it sounds like you might just want to switch to the Edge package set, which is more of a rolling release where you get package updates once or twice a week as opposed to once a quarter when there's a numbered release that comes out. Obviously, you still have to upgrade your world and kernel if you want to move to like 11 current or something, but that will keep you on the latest cutting edge PCBSD ports and packages. And then when 10.2 lands, of course, you'll get a notice that that's available to update to as well. But yeah, you could. There's definitely ways to do that. So I think you can
in general,
rolling as you want.
That's how the ports tree works, and so nothing's required to get to that.
Yeah.
The stuff we're interested in is using the package tool for the base system so that you can do that with the base system and run like a stable branch and get a weekly update to it.
That would be really cool. And once the packaging of world and kernel happens, who knows? Maybe that becomes a real possibility now.
Okay, so next question is from Hrishi, asking about privilege separation in Beehive. He said, will Beehive eventually get privilege separation so that it does not have to be run as root? Yes, that is something they're looking at, although I don't know how hard it'll be to do. Some of the stuff like creating a tap device, the creating of it requires root, although there is a sysctl you can set to allow non-root users to open tap devices. Or maybe they can even create them. I forget. There's a sysctl for tap to deal with some of that. So there are some things that can happen that way. And, there's been some talk about... I
want to say OpenVPN lets you create them as users.
Yeah, I think there's a sysctl you can set that I think does let you do it. But so in the end, I don't know how probable that is. One thing that people have been looking at is getting it to run in a jail, which mostly just means you have to make sure you expose the dev VMM stuff to it, and that would do something. But in the end, I don't know the answer to that yet.
Well, as Beehive matures and stuff, I imagine this will come up more, and we'll probably get more of a definitive answer down the road.
There's a project with me and some other people, and we're working on getting a config file for Beehive to make it less hard to work with.
Less black magic and all that. Well, cool. We'll look forward to that. Okay, we have another long one next down. We have Clint here, writes in about domain names. He says, I own several misspelled domains that I would like to properly resolve or redirect to my good domain that uses a public key certification for all connections. What I've been doing for years is simply creating A records for each misspelled root domain and common subdomains and pointing them to the IP address of the server hosting the good domain. The Nginx 301's the connections to the good daemon on port 443. Also, I only have an SSL cert for the good domain. But I thought of a potential problem today as I was renewing my domains and double-checking my DNS and Nginx configuration. My good site is only served on port 443, plus an STS header with a 1-year expiration is set for every connection. So if someone types in a misspelled domain, which by default be redirected to port 80, would their browser issue a security warning and prevent them from being redirected to my good domain on a secured connection?
As long as you're not setting the HSTS header on the port 80, it should be fine, because it's after the redirect, so the HSTS they always see on the good domain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And he says one solution he thought of was to use CNAME records instead, but I vaguely remember Alan mentioning why it's bad to use a CNAME for your root
It's actually
domain.
not allowed.
Does
You
this
just can't do it.
Oh, well, there you go. Can't be done. So he's what's the best way to redirect?
Well, because the other thing is with a CNAME, that's happening outside the HTTP protocol, and so it's actually not a redirect. And as far as your browser is concerned, it would be the same as a record, and so it would have exactly the same problems and wouldn't help you at all.
So he goes through some CNAME examples here, which, as you said,
so he says the best way to redirect connections from all of his unsecured misspelled domains to his secured good domain, while trying to avoid any scary warnings. As long as you're doing an actual redirect, then it should already be working perfectly for you. The problem will be if anybody tries to go HTTPS, the bad domain, then they will get the warning saying, hey, this site is pretending to be HTTPS, the good domain. You can use SNI, server name indication, to actually have multiple different SSL sites, but then you're buying certificates for all those bad domains. And if you get enough traffic on them, it might be worth it because you can get search pretty cheap, like $10 or so. And then you could actually have the redirect even over HTTPS and avoid part of the problem. But in general, if you're doing it properly with a real redirect in Nginx, then you shouldn't get any scary security warnings. However, if you're using a CNAME, it's not going to work as you intended.
Cool. Okay. Well, last up, we have Sergey writes in with the jail confusion is what he says. So he says, I've been reviewing for the past few weeks a lot of unofficial documentation on the net about jails, and maybe it's just my impression, but it seems like we're presently stuck in a pretty chaotic situation. The official FreeBSD handbook still only documents the old rc.d style, being already deprecated in 10.x and scheduled to be removed for 11.x. He said frameworks like EasyJail probably need support and feedback to keep up the good work, and then he has a link to a mailing list post here. He said many of the other frameworks are either too new, untested, or their goals are set for specialized large deployments. I would bet that many new casual jail users could also use an updated year 2013 tutorial just focusing on the jail basics. In other words, jail.conf, maybe some ZFS integration, considering that many of us rolled a couple of jails where flavors, cloning, and replication fall back in favor of a straight install, deploy, and backup policy. He says, anyway, thanks for the great program. Every week we're getting closer to the magic 100 episode.
I'm not a fan of the jail.conf setup, and I would change the way it was done. And so part of the reason why there's no documentation is because no one's written it. And I'm not going to write it because I would rather change jail.conf to be more sane first and then write the documentation on the new way.
It down the whole time. This is not the way I would do it. This is horrible.
Well,
we can't have docs.
The main problem is that the way they structured it, it's basically its own special config file format, right? It uses some braces and stuff, but it doesn't actually follow the format that every other format that looks similar to it does. And so they're not X. It's not
yet another thing.
Right. It's not key equals value. Some of them are just a blob on its own line, and that means something. And so parsing it is a huge pain, and that's why EasyJail doesn't do it. For now, I use EasyJail, and I just ignore the warning that's saying, hey, you should switch away from RC variables to jail.conf because it's going to go away. Because as far as I know, it's actually not gone away.
Not yet.
Yeah, and then I've heard good things about IOCage, although it also seems to do a bunch of things that I wouldn't like, so it's hard to say.
Okay.
Yeah, jails kind of suffer from the fact that everybody has their own way of doing it, and that they like their way, and they don't want to do it the other way. That's kind of the power is
very
that
much a Lego building block situation
exactly.
where we all build our spaceship slightly differently.
Yeah, and so all the tools are there. You can build, any of 8 different styles of spaceship. You just got to pick one. And yes, there is the concern of, the support for the one you're using is going to go away, but probably not that likely.
Okay. Well, next we have some mailing list gold. And this is actually interesting. It's titled An Unexpected BSD User, and it was sent over to the FreeBSD advocacy group. and I'll just read it as is here. He says, most BSD users I encounter are developers, sysadmins, or people in other computing fields. I guess that most people on this list would have the same experience. Occasionally I meet a person of some other vocation who's a Linux user. Rarely do I encounter a BSD user in the wild, but it happened today, so I thought I would share. 2 tradesmen arrived to remove the asbestos cladding from my shed. They asked me to move my car. After doing this, one of them asked, so are you some sort of open source developer? Yes, I am. How did you guess? Well, your license plate or your number plate. He said, I was astonished. My wife had been teasing me for years that no one understands my BSD flavored personalized plates. Well, take that. He said, anyhow, I asked him whether he uses free software, and he explained that he'd been using BSD for 15 years. He did not specify which, perhaps FreeBSD, perhaps not. So there you have it. It's easy to be blinkered and imagine that BSD is only used by computering people with computery jobs. But it's nice to be reminded that BSD and free software in general does reach into the everyday lives of all kinds of people. Cheers, Fraser. Yeah, that's pretty neat. I'd say I had something happen to that. Something like that happened to me a couple years ago, where I was walking into a Home Depot of all places, and I had one of the conference shirts on, and somebody stopped me, and I forget, he worked at a bank or something. Oh yeah, I've used FreeBSD on different things off and on for years and whatnot. So it happened.
I had I think the New York BSD Con shirt, and I was at my aunt made me go with her to a health food store or something, and one of the guys there, who she had asked questions about the different kinds of fancy milk they have or whatever, and he saw my shirt. He's like, oh, are you into like Linux and stuff? I'm like, not really Linux, but I'm like, what is someone that knows about BSD doing at a health food store? Because he worked there, and he was like, yeah, I used to be into computers, but I give it up or something. I was like, that's weird, but you know.
Hey, it happens. Okay, well, cool. Well, as we wrap up the show here, guys, we do want to remind you to send in your anything you find, pretty much. Comments, if you have show ideas or topics, or you find something cool on the net, a story or some idea, something you'd like us to mention. Of course, send that in to feedback@bsdnow.tv. That's what gets monitored, so please try and send everything there. Also, the OpenBSD router tutorial has been reorganized and updated for the new 5.7 release. So it has a new section on bandwidth statistics, and has gotten so big that it needs its own table of contents now. So that's pretty cool. An evolving tutorial. And also, this year's VBSDCon has been formally announced, and this is going to take place September 11th through the 13th.
Yeah, so
in Reston, Virginia.
So the 11th during the day will be a FreeBSD Developer Summit, and then starting on the evening of the 11th is the conference for everyone, where we'll have the dinner where everybody's when we all first arrive, and then there will be the 2-day conference, and should be lots of fun. I know the one in 2013 was really good. So
yeah, it's definitely a fun conference, and it's nice because it's one on the East Coast too, because you have Meet BSD out on
West Coast.
The West Coast.
And so this is on the years when there's not going to be a Meet BSD, and it's back and forth. It's earlier in the year, so the weather will be nicer in Virginia as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I think I will probably try and drive up to that one, because that's a very pleasant drive for us, only about 7 hours.
They also mentioned that they have slots for Hacker Lounge and Doc Sprints, as well as some self-moderated sessions, and so there'll be lots of unconferencey style stuff as well. So that's always good.
And speaking of unconferencey, they don't do a typical call for papers, but they do welcome people to submit talk ideas for consideration, and then I think they go out and find the people to talk about that. So they have send it into vbsdcon@verisign.com if you just have a suggestion or idea, something you'd like to see there. And I'm sure they'd love to hear from
as the date gets a bit closer, we have an interview with them to talk about the conference. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, that'll be good. Also, Michigan listeners, if you're out there, there's a new BSD users group which is just starting up called livebug.org, livbug.org. Go check that out. Which city in Michigan is that?
Well, it's Livingston County, so that's a bunch of cities, but the actual event will be at the Hamburg Township Library.
Okay. Well, if you're anywhere within driving distance of that, it looks like they're going to be having an introduction talk on OpenBSD to start off with, but definitely get out there and join your local BSD users group. So thank you so much for being on the show with us this week. Of course, if you've started a bug or you have one in your area that we've not mentioned on the show in the past, let us know so we can make sure to make others aware, so you can get some more folks out to it. And of course, we'll look forward to seeing you guys all same time next week. So stay tuned for future episodes and news, and look forward to talking to you.